Zone of the Enders originally came out in 2001 and was famously released with a demo of Metal Gear 2. It was a new IP that was both created and published by Konami, with the producer being Hideo Kojima, but he also credited as being the one to create the opening movie in the game. But this was a new IP release for PlayStation 2, with it being a high-speed mecha game. And with a new IP come out in 2001, interesting choice. I feel like bundling it with a MGS2 was also a good idea as well, although I've seen many claim that they only cared about it solely because it came with MGS2, but it does help people gain interest. Even by the time I heard about Zone of the Enders, MGS2 was already out, so Zone of the Enders just only had itself to prove itself. Zone of the Enders, much like Boktai, was always one of those other franchises that Kojima had a hand in, but was never one of those things that became as popular as Metal Gear Solid, but you would occasionally find references to it in the Metal Gear Solid franchise, whether it be cardboard boxes that have the Zoe logo on it, or Metal Gear Solid 5 including the sub-weapon Hydra as a boat you can use in it. So clearly something that Kojima, or some Kojima Productions, still had reference for and enjoyed, and has a cult following. Many people will generally say to play the latest entry, the second runner, but we're not there yet. This game also did get a port to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, but those ports were generally not well liked, needing many after-the-fact updates in order to make them better, along with the sequel getting ported. And then comes to PS4 and PC, they only ported the sequel, the second runner, and completely left this game behind, which made me go, why did they leave this one behind specifically? That's just a weird thing to do when releasing port reports. But enough about history of the game, let's get to the game itself. The main premise at 22nd century, mankind has progressed so far that they have space colonies on Mars and around Jupiter in order to further expand humanity, with the creation of laborious extra-orbital vehicles, or LEVs for short, being mechas that can be used for labor and military in order to further expand humanity's pioneering into space, and eventual discovery of Metatron, a high-energy ore that can be used for further advancements. But the people in power on Earth do not like those who were born and raised in the colonies of Mars and Jupiter, insultingly referring to them as Enders. So those in power on Earth decide to essentially make life worse for those in Mars and Jupiter by creating way more laws and taxes in order to make their lives worse, with those on Mars and Jupiter deciding to rise up against them, with the most notorious being BAHRAM, an extremist group that essentially sees people raised on Mars as superior to the Earthlings. And with further advancements to Metatron are the creations of orbital frames, special mechas that are designed explicitly for combat, although the skill of the orbital frame depends solely on the skill of the runner. The mech itself does not have all the power if the runner is not good at it. This is where we introduce our main character, Leo, a 13-year-old kid who lives on a colony orbiting Jupiter that gets invaded as part of the Horn Terror War, with seemingly everyone he knows getting killed, and ends up finding the orbital frame Jehuty, with him now becoming a runner of it because, well, it's basically do or die. And despite the fact that Leo does not want to kill people and oppose this war, he doesn't have much of a choice considering the situation going on around him. Despite the large setup I had to go through, that's pretty much only really shown in the opening, as the game mostly focuses on the plight of Leo, with everything I mentioned with stuff that involves BAHRAM and the war going on being very important, and you do see the catastrophe firsthand, but this is mostly Leo's plight and becoming a runner of Jehuty, and the fact that he does not want to participate in this war or murder. And Leo, I feel, is actually a really good protagonist. As people complain about him, but every complaint people give him is because, why is he so whiny? I don't know, maybe because a 13-year-old plunged into a war, has seen people that didn't even like him ended up dying in front of him and now has to go around murdering people he wants to survive while being told what to do by these mysterious people who want the orbital frame Jehuty, as someone else was supposed to be the runner of it, but they seem to have died before they could get their hands on it, and now Leo is the runner of Jehuty. Jehuty also has the AI Ada, a code calculating AI that just looks for the quote-unquote logical solutions, with Leo's emotions and pacifism constantly being deemed as illogical to the AI. And I love this moment early on where Ada confirms that every enemy around him is now deceased and congratulates Leo on eliminating the enemies, only for Leo to scream in agony at the fact that that means he has murdered a bunch of people just activating and using Jehuty alone.
The target has disappeared. I can detect no sign of vital activity.
You mean that everyone is dead?
That is correct. Good work, sir.
I love that dynamic between Leo and Ada, the fact that Leo constantly does all these things that Ada does not understand, but like I said, the powered orbital frame means nothing without the skill of the runner. So despite Ada complaining about Leo, I like the fact that despite being a cold calculating AI, Ada is sassy towards Leo.
How awful.
Damn it!
Listen, Leo, can't you help those people?
How?
Just like you helped me. Can't you do that for them too?
Allow me to interrupt. As I stated earlier, you should not undertake illogical actions that have no bearing on our mission.
But just for a little while.
This orbital frame and all aboard have been ordered to participate in operations on Mars. In order to complete our mission, we should not engage in any other activities.
Oh, I see.
Also, judging from the capabilities of the frame runner, the risk rate for such an illogical action is very high.
Ada, where is that hospital?
It can't make him do anything, which is why Leo has to be the one charged with making the decisions. So if Leo makes a decision Ada doesn't like, all Ada can do is just sit there and call him illogical and not understand why he feels the way he is. You also have the character Celvice, who's Leo's only actual friend, as in a friend that actually wants him around, and she also joins this adventure, who ends up helping Leo's guide him want to be more pacifistic, but also begging him to respond to these SOS missions that Ada finds ridiculous that they're wasting time on, because the main mission that Leo is given is to deliver Jehuty to the Space Force, so anything else extra is seen as wasting time to Ada, and doesn't understand why these two are focused so much on these side missions when they're my main goal. But, just to say, the dynamic between Ada, Celvice, and Leo is what makes this whole entire story. And you can also tell how try to cheat things when it comes to presentation, because while this game does occasionally have these cutscenes with the characters on screen, most of the game's story is told through audio, with the main cutscenes having this cockpit view that you can move around the camera and everything to look around, but you just had these little windows that represent the one on the left being if Leo Celvice is talking, the one on the right being if someone from the Space Force or an opponent is talking to Leo, and the one in the middle being if Ada itself is talking to Leo. And that's where most of the game's story comes from, these dialogue and audio only bits, which is an interesting way of trying to pretty much save costs for this new IP that feels like a tech demo. So hats off to developers to making that work when it comes to the presentation of the game. There are cutscenes in the game that have the characters on screen and everything, but they're far and few between, mostly being used for the early game and the end game. Despite the main story itself being rather short and simple, what I really like about is the fact that it does not hold back with showing all the destruction, especially with the gameplay highlighting more of the destruction going on in disaster and how Leo feels about it. I know people constantly complain, oh, Leo's so whiny, everything. How about you shut up and think about the fact that he's a 13-year-old suddenly plunged into a war scenario against his will and now has to go around killing people with his main source of frustration, which is what made him initially hesitate to even help the Space Force, because he believes they just want him to be a cold murderer, and that's it. Not to take into account that they think that he's a pilot of Jehuty, he has to do certain things because he's the only one who can run it right now. He is the runner of Jehuty. But he's thinking from the perspective of, these adults having this war must be these cold, uncaring people for causing all this destruction, or just being okay with telling a kid, hey, can you go around doing some things for us in that mech and potentially murder more people? JK, thanks, bye. But, like I said, Leo's only a 13-year-old and doesn't know the full scope, he only knows his perspective. And throughout the game, you can see that building further and further on, especially with Ada getting frustrated. Like the fact that Leo refuses to kill other runners and lets them go, with Ada itself sassily telling Leo how it can think about 17 reasons why letting these people live is a bad idea.
Destroy it? Why? They can't fight anymore.
Your question does not compute. Why not destroy it?
Why should I kill when there's no reason to?
I compute 17 clear reasons for such action. Most pressing is possibility of the target gaining access to another orbital frame and returning to battle at another time and place.
Shut up! I refuse to destroy it. What's the point of attacking those who have no intention of attacking us?
Do you wish me to state the reason?
But Leo's the one in charge, so Ada can't make him do anything. This game does have 2 endings, but the bad ending is something that honestly I can't imagine anyone actually getting naturally because of how specific the requirements are, that's more in the gameplay. So your main ending will be the good ending, which, depending on how you view it, may or may not leave a bad taste in your mouth because of the fact that it ends pretty abruptly depending on how you see it. You see it based on how the game's creator, Noriaki Okumura, pretty much thought making this story. You see how it works, but from a video game sense of everything, it does feel like it's abrupt and feels like it doesn't have much payoff in the end, with instead more of a payoff coming if you were to play the next few entries. Although Okumura did not direct the second runner, the more popular entry, without getting a new director who had a completely different mindset philosophy, which is why the second runner is drastically different from this first entry. Now for the gameplay, with this being a high-speed mech game, with Jehuty piloting very fast and the controls, for a first time being done for this kind of game by the developers, feel so damn fun to use. Jehuty's tools are so good, I think, with the fact that, hey, if you're long range, your attack is a little shot, they can also end up charging up using burst in order to make a bigger shot, or if you're close up, Jehuty will use its arm blade they can always see attached to it at all times in order to close it for melee attacks. You can also dash, which not only gives you a burst of speed, but can hold it to keep boosting in order to avoid attacks, or dash into the enemy for more powerful attacks and everything. You do also obtain sub-weapons, most of which are optional upgrades, but the problem is, every sub-weapon in this game sucks. Like, they're either too little with how damage they do, or if they have decent damage, they have too much wind up where the enemy will move out of the way by the time Jehuty even actually uses it, making every sub-weapon just not worth using. There is one cool sub-weapon, a decoy that you get that is mandatory to obtain, but later on enemies either just ignore the decoy or will destroy the decoy so fast you don't have any chance to actually capitalize on the fact that they chose the wrong targets. I do love the fact that when you go into locales, you do actually see what each enemy's holding, so you want to refill sub-weapon that you may be using, you can in fact just immediately go to enemy, fight them, and get more of it. Or the place where you get the sub-weapon to begin with will always have more, so you can refuel it. So if you do enjoy sub-weapons, you can do that. Speaking of towns, Zone of the Enders is broken up to several hub areas. While there is a big overall map, these small hub areas are where actual combat mission structures will happen, with the game generally trying to give you direction to progress forward, but there are times where you have to backtrack in order to gain other tools to progress. And by sometimes, I mean most of the game is in fact backtracking. The main part of the game, which is the middle portion, is mostly just backtracking to get certain tools to progress. Something that, on my first playthrough, I started feeling annoyed by because some of the stuff I was like, what am I supposed to do? Especially since some things they indicate may not properly direct in the right way. Like one point that I had a cutscene that showed an enemy flying away. I wasn't sure that meant the enemy was still around, or the enemy actually went somewhere. But the problem is, they did go somewhere. Where'd they go? I don't know. And at one point, I found them, but I needed a certain upgrade. An upgrade I thought I got, but it turns out I technically didn't get. I'll explain more later. That made things more confusing. So you have to backtrack a lot. On top of the fact that while the environments are detailed, you can notice certain things in the environment. So there are points where a character will mention, oh, I remember seeing this thing here. It would be better if they told you where it was, but you can notice the same thing that they're noticing. And there is one point where you could get an upgrade necessary for the game early on. I wish you could do that for multiple of the stuff, but only one of which you can get early on if you remember that certain thing and go do it before the game requires it. Highlight point, there's one section in which Leo needs to essentially control one of the LEVs in order to end up going to do something because Jehuty can't do it itself. So you actually can find an unmanned LEV in order to control it. You can actually see it in the level itself, so you can notice it, but it's one of those things you don't think about, so when the game suddenly asks you to look for one, you may go, where am I supposed to go, kind of problem, even though you can see it in hindsight. Or the fact that that LEV gets an upgrade, but the LEV got the upgrade, not Jehuty. So if you were to go back to a locale where Leo leaves the thing, you can go to the LEV and get the upgrade for Jehuty, getting that thing done early before the game actually requires an upgrade, which is an interesting way of handling for progression, but it's the only time where the game lets you essentially do something early. Otherwise, you can't do things early. Like I mentioned, you can see the LEV you need later in the story, but Leo and nobody will acknowledge it until it's relevant for the story, kind of thing. Then comes the SOS missions, where you want to save civilians and buildings, and you are rated depending on how well you do when it comes to saving people. Which you have the basic ability of Jehuty being to grab enemies and immediately send them flying in a different direction. So it's very easy to grab an enemy and take them away from the buildings. But if you're careless, you may end up knocking them towards a building or doing an attack that ends up killing civilians and destroying buildings in the process. So they let you feel accidentally causing the destruction of hurting more civilians. And you are rated for it, with the characters commenting if Leo is screwing up attacking the buildings. I mentioned this game has a bad ending, or get the bad ending, you have to completely and utterly fail every single SOS missions. And by completely utterly fail, I mean no survivors and no buildings left standing. Which, like I said, is way easier said than done, so I can't imagine someone getting a bad ending by accident, because you would have to purposely be destroying everything, because the enemies aren't that efficient at actually attacking the civilians.
We will hold battle position. Enemy backup force is approaching our location. Civilian casualties increasing due to battle. We will cease battle position. Damage to the surroundings increasing due to battle. Civilian casualties increasing due to battle.
But I do that to fight to let you feel the whole entire aspect of war of trying to stop this, and let you accidentally cause friendly fire in the process of trying to do these SOS missions. It's a great way of combining the narrative and the gameplay on top of the fact that you're rated on it. And there is a different ending theme if you do manage to perfectly rank all these SOS missions, which again is also easier said than done. The SOS missions, for the most part, are also optional. You don't even have to do them, but like Ada mentioned, Leo being an illogical person, he'll probably still try to do them, or the player will still try to send SOS missions, even situations where Jehuty could be weakened and in low health, but you can still try and do it. You can still go out of your way in order to help these people in a situation, with the characters noting how you're in a bad situation yourself, but you still went out of the way to selflessly save civilians. The only other major point frustration I can think of for this game is the fact that Ada keeps on talking and talking when the gameplay, with Ada constantly needing to update your status. Meaning there's a lot of times where Ada will mention enemies nearby, enemies coming, you leaving the battle zone, you engage in the battle zone, you getting new equipment, you getting Metatron, and stuff like that. So you may get frustrated that Ada, in its attempts to basically try and constantly give the runner information may end up becoming annoying, if that means Ada will constantly be speaking to the player on what they currently have done, what they currently did, or warning them if other things are coming to get them.
We have shot down the enemy. Colony damage increasing due to battle. Enemy backup forces are in battle position. Enemy backup force is approaching our location. Civilian casualties increasing due to battle. We have shot down the enemy.
You do also have boss encounters, which do act more as a puzzle, but throughout this game, Jehuty can be destroyed easily as on normal mode, and the bosses are no different. So the fact that both you and the bosses are on similar footing when it comes to how quickly your health can be depleted makes the boss fights go fast, but feel frantic in the fact that you're both constantly in danger, and despite these orbital frames being something that can potentially shape the destiny of humanity, you are still on the same level, which I do like that aspect. That if the player can die fast, so can the boss and enemies. And when it comes to regular enemies, they do level up. There's a level up system of sorts that I don't know how it works in regards to Jehuty, and I'm sure it just does more damage or gives you more defense. But I do notice that for enemies, the higher their level, not only do they have more health, their tactics also get smarter. They do more things in order to counter the stuff you can do with Jehuty, which is a super cool touch. I remember one enemy that tried to use a burst attack on, but the enemy would always set up a counter to make the burst always fail, which was a super cool fact that the enemy gets smarter the higher the levels are throughout the game. There are also some enemy commanders you can find on the map that you can actually kill first, which will drop the level of every enemy in the area by 1, making it easier to pick them off if you pick to fight the hardest squad there first. Overall, I like Zodi Enders. This is the first time I ever played it, with at this point, I only ever played the second runner, which is a more recommended sequel, but this one is still freaking cool, especially for a first entry of a new IP on the PS2. Like I said, the main issue with the gameplay is the fact that the exploration stuff can be annoying and you don't know where to go, but this game is short, with exploration essentially being most of the runtime. So you'll be able to figure out where the things go pretty quickly. You will find this game being pretty short, probably 3 to 5 hours total, which is why some people feel like the exploration bits are there to quote-unquote pad out the game. On top of the fact that the main story beats happen in the beginning and ending of the game, but does not mean that the interactions between Leo, Celvice, and Ada aren't also adding to the story of the game, especially when it comes to Leo's characterization. But like I said, mainly just discount Leo's characterization because how dare this child plunge into war, be so whiny and upset, and not want to kill other people. Even though the game also has a response to that, which is Ada having the same feeling, but Ada's a cold calculating machine that just thinks killing these people is the best option because what if they cause more destruction? They're also responsible for a lot of destruction happening to the colony. Why would this child want to let them live, and such and such? So there's a character like that that has a whole entire purpose. There are other characters there to balance out Leo's whole personality, which is why I don't feel the issue of people going, oh, Leo's a bad protagonist. It's like, no, he's a very good protagonist, especially what they're trying to go for this game and everything, and the tone and feeling they want to give you, which is something the second runner decides to pretty much completely change. But people prefer the second runner, but we'll get to that. We'll get to that game. I will also say that constant Ada talk during gameplay can get annoying at some point, and since every sub-weapon just isn't worth using, you might feel, especially the short runtime, you can feel the game being repetitive since you're mostly relying on Jehuty's basic attacks. Basic attacks are great, they're fun to use, they're very useful, but I just wish the sub-weapons had more of a purpose to them, considering the fact of there's so many, there's so much variety, but they're just so underwhelming that you're better off just using a basic attack, which is way more than what you need. Since enemies die fast, that also means the basic attacks get the job done very much well and keep the fast-paced action going. So I said, I like Zodi Enders 1, and it sucks this game constantly gets overlooked solely in favor for the second runner. Not helped that the HD port was not a good port initially, And from what I've read, I know it got patched on PS3, but I also know the 360 version apparently never got patched, making the HD collection on Xbox 360 the worst way to replay these games. Unfortunately, it's worth only ever patched the PS3 version, but not the other version. Although I'm playing this game on a PS2 emulator, but that's not the point. And who's I gotta say about Zora the Enders? It is, I feel, a great start to a great franchise. I've seen people mention there are rumors that despite this game selling a lot, apparently many people supposedly returned it, and many people only bought the game for the Metal Gear Solid 2 demo, which if that's the case, I feel that sucks because this was a great start to a new franchise, and one of those things that as a Boktai fan, I had a feeling of a big thing being like, hey, cult following only, many people don't care, they come up Metal Gear Solid only. Where are the people adventure fans at? Anyway, I got some of the Enders. Alright then, good day.